Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a truly wild piece of cultural history. We are going to completely pull back the curtain on the Hollywood sex symbol. But here's the absolute critical thing you've got to understand right from the start. The bombshell wasn't just a person. Not at all. As we'll see today, she was a highly engineered, meticulously crafted studio solution. We're going to unpack the fascinating reality of how these living, breathing people were manufactured into walking archetypes, and, maybe even more importantly, where this entire bizarre system is heading next.
So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. The anatomy of an archetype, 2. The Golden Age blueprint, 3. The Hollywood machine, 4. The rebirth cycle, and finally, 5. The artificial future.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this quote perfectly captures the core thesis of our explainer. When we look back at the golden age of Hollywood, it's just so easy to get lost in the glamour, the flashbulbs, all that nostalgia. But at its core, the sex symbol was essentially a product designed to solve a very specific business problem. It was this brilliant, albeit completely ruthless formula designed to navigate super strict censorship rules while simultaneously selling millions of tickets.
Section 1. Anatomy of an archetype, engineering the walking libido.
To really wrap our heads around this, we have to stop just celebrating beautiful actresses and start looking at this as a manufactured product. We need to look at how a walking libido was engineered, literally from the ground up. A golden age sex symbol wasn't just about natural beauty, right? It was a studio packaged commodity from the 1920s straight through to the 1960s. These women were engineered to sell everything. Movie tickets, war bonds, lipstick, you name it. Their bodies essentially became intellectual property owned by the studios, and their entire public personalities were just complete PR inventions. The deal was totally brutal, but it was clear. The studios literally owned your image, your weight, your teeth, and even your personal relationships. In exchange, the actress got fame, money, and unfortunately, quite often, a lifetime of trauma. The public, meanwhile, got to pretend they weren't repressed. So how exactly did this archetype develop over time?
Moving into Section 2, the Golden Age Blueprint, the evolution of the bombshell.
Let's move to and see how this builds across the decades. It all starts back in 1922 with Clara Bow, the original It Girl. She was the first modern sex symbol, bringing that chaotic, ankle-showing 1920s flapper energy to the screen. But by 1931, Jean Harlow locks in the platinum blonde archetype. And I mean, she was literally burning her scalp with peroxide and ammonia to get that specific look. In 1941, Rita Hayworth becomes the ultimate pinup, going through incredibly painful electrolysis just to raise her hairline for the cameras. By 1953, Marilyn Monroe perfects the formula to become the definitive symbol. But then jump to 1966, Raquel Welch in that famous fur bikini for 1 million years BC. She had almost no lines in the movie. It was pure body as a ticket, marking the absolute last gasp of the studio-era bombshell before second-wave feminism and New Hollywood completely changed all the rules.
To truly grasp the insane scale of this manufactured image, just think about this number, 5 million. That is the number of copies of Betty Grable's famous 1942 pinup photo that the U.S. government shipped to troops during World War II. Think about that for a second. There were more photos of Betty Grable shipped overseas than there were rifles. Her legs were famously insured by Lloyd's of London for $1 million. It proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that in the hands of the studios and the government, sex wasn't just some marketing tool, it was a highly effective weapon for troop morale. But what actually fueled this massive output?
Section 3. The Hollywood machine. Control, censorship, and casualties.
Let's take a look under the hood at the brutal, unseen mechanics that made these glamorous images possible. First up, you had the studio contract. These were intense 7-year deals where MGM or Fox essentially owned you, lock, stock, and barrel, until the de Havilland Law finally broke those frankly slavery-like contracts in 1954. Then you've got the Hays Code. And this is incredibly ironic, right? The strict censorship of the Hays Code from 1934 to 1968 meant studios couldn't actually show sex, so they were forced to imply it. Skin-tight gowns, breathy voices, wet lips. Censorship actually made these symbols way more iconic and powerful because of the implication. The code finally died when movies like Bonnie and Clyde made implication unnecessary. And finally, the male gaze. Every director, every producer, every writer was male. Women were lit and shot specifically to please men. A system that didn't collapse until 1970s second-wave feminism finally demanded actual human characters, not just pretty posters.
And this brilliantly illustrates the really tragic dichotomy of the Hollywood machine. On one side, we see the polished public myth, The insured legs, the PR spin that these girls were magically discovered at a soda fountain, and their status as the highest paid stars on Earth. But then, look at the other side, the grim human cost. Jean Harlow dead of kidney failure at just 26. Marilyn Monroe dead at 36. Rita Hayworth, heavily manipulated by the studio her whole life, dying alone with Alzheimer's, asking, who are all these men? Not to mention the studio-enforced weight loss and forced abortions. They were all completely used up to generate box office returns and tragically discarded when the system was done with them. So what happens when a culture finally tries to move past this exploitative archetype?
Section 4. The rebirth cycle. The bombshell always returns.
Because, well, if history tells us anything, the bombshell always returns. There is a remarkably consistent pattern recognition at play here. It goes like this. Step 1. The broader culture shifts toward aesthetics that are thin, serious, or maybe androgynous. We saw it with those severe 1940s shoulder pads, the 1980s aerobics-obsessed thinness, and of course, the heroin chic of the 2000s. And then, step 2 invariably follows. The curvy blonde bombshell resurrects herself. It literally happens every single time. And it's not really just about the hair color, it's a specific kind of rebellion. It's a return to something soft, voluptuous, and unapologetically feminine, exactly when the high fashion world dictates otherwise.
Let's trace this lineage real quick, starting with the blueprint laid down by Mae West, all the way up to today. You have Diana Dors, who was the 1950s British answer to Marilyn. Then there's Jane Mansfield. She leaned incredibly hard into the cartoonish bombshell image. But remarkably, she was hiding a genius-level 163 IQ and spoke 5 languages. But playing dumb simply paid better. In the 60s, Brigitte Bardot shifted the vibe to a barefoot, natural sex kitten. Jumping to the 90s, Pamela Anderson and Anna Nicole Smith brought back a one-to-one revival of that extreme 1950s silhouette. Which brings us to Scarlett Johansson, the modern reinvention. She brought back the classic Hollywood bombshell face and curves right during the size 0 2000s, but she successfully demanded to be taken seriously as a dramatic actor for 2 decades.
Section 5. The artificial future. Dead women work forever.
But where does this archetype actually go when we remove human beings from the equation entirely? We're shifting tones slightly here, because the predictions derived from our sources for the next 5 to 20 years, honestly, they sound like science fiction, but they are rapidly becoming reality. Walk through this chilling timeline with me. In the near future, the archetype will likely outlive the human entirely. By 2027, predictions show AI versions of Marilyn Monroe being fully licensed for new ads or even platforms like OnlyFans. Because they're intellectual property, estate companies get paid and absolutely no consent from the actual deceased woman is needed. Dead women work forever. By 2030, expect endless trauma-focused biopics. By 2040, the rise of VR could bring us 1940s starlet girlfriend simulators, an ethically cursed but financially massive market. And finally, by 2046, the cultural backlash will be so complete that film schools may literally just teach the entire Golden Age studio era as sex trafficking with cameras.
To highlight just how much IP ownership is changing the landscape, consider this prediction: 60%. By the year 2035, it's predicted that 60% of all sex symbol revenue will come from dead people. Crazy, right? But why? Because living actors today actually have agency, they have intimacy coordinators, and they refuse to be packaged and controlled like products. Dead actors, owned by corporate brand groups, simply cannot say no.
Now, what's really interesting about this is if we extrapolate 100 years into the future, to 2125, our sources suggest 3 main scenarios. Scenario 1, the sex symbol becomes a museum piece, literally viewed as a bizarre 20th century fertility totem used by ancestors to sell cars and war bonds. Scenario 2, the heritage sex symbol. You pay a $10,000 a month subscription for an unaging AI of Monroe that talks to you and never ever says no. Or Scenario 3, erasure. The phrase sex symbol is banned entirely, considered workplace harassment, and chemistry is purely algorithmic.
So, as we wrap up this historical analysis, the stark reality is this. The Golden Age sex symbol died with Marilyn Monroe because society finally stopped pretending that the packaging wasn't the entire point. But despite tremendous progress, we have the Me Too movement, female directors, intimacy coordinators, women are still constantly packaged as bodies first. The key difference? Now it's on Instagram and TikTok. People are doing the packaging to themselves, completely for free, chasing aesthetics like office siren or dark feminine without knowing the deep history of studio abuse behind those exact looks.
So I'll leave you with this provocative final thought. MGM and Fox might be things of the past, but if the algorithm is the new studio head dictating how people present their bodies for clicks and views, have we really changed the system, or did we just update the software? It is a crucial question for our modern media literacy. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning what you see on your screen, and I will see you next time.